Many years ago, in the city of Kaduna, lived a young man named George. George was the kind of person everyone admired. At just 30 years old, he had built a life many people only dreamed of. He owned a big, beautiful house, drove fancy cars, and ran a successful business. People often said, George is proof that hard work pays off, because they saw how much effort he put into everything. But behind all his success, George carried a quiet sadness. He was lonely, even though he had 2 siblings. They didn't really care about him. They only called when they needed help or money. His older sister called him often, but George always knew what the calls were about. George, can you help me with rent this month? She had asked the last time. George, my car is acting up. Can you help with repairs? His brother would say. No one ever asked, how are you, George? Or are you okay? This made George feel empty. He wanted someone who truly cared about him, someone to love him for who he was, not for what he had. One evening, George sat alone in his living room, staring at the ceiling. He let out a deep sigh and said aloud, I think I need a wife, someone who will love me for me, not for my money. With that thought, George began to search. But it wasn't easy. He didn't have any close female friends, and the women he did know didn't seem like the right fit. George is a man of faith, so he decided to fast and pray for 7 days, asking God to guide him. Each morning, he knelt by his bed and prayed, Lord, please help me. I don't want to make a mistake. Send me a wife who will bring peace into my life, someone who will love me for who I am. During the fast, George avoided distractions. He stayed off social media and didn't go out much. By the end of the 7 days, he felt calm. He believed God had heard his prayer. A few days later, George decided to treat himself to lunch at a nearby restaurant. It was a cozy place with soft music playing. He ordered his favorite, jollof rice with grilled chicken, and enjoyed his meal. After paying, he walked out feeling full and happy. But the next morning, when he wanted to use his bank card, he realized something was wrong. My wallet, he shouted, checking his pants from the night before. He quickly remembered the restaurant and rushed there. When he arrived, he asked the waiter, Excuse me, did anyone find a wallet here last night? The waiter shook his head. No, sir. George asked the other staff and even the security guards, but they all said no. He was about to leave, feeling disappointed, when he heard a soft voice behind him. Excuse me, sir, is this yours? He turned around and saw a young woman holding up his wallet. His heart skipped a beat. Yes, that's mine, he said, relieved. Thank you so much. You're welcome, she said with a smile. As he collected the wallet, their hands brushed. There was something different about her. He wanted to say more, but she had already turned to go. That night, George couldn't stop thinking about her. I should have at least asked her name, he muttered. The next morning, he went back to the restaurant, hoping to see her again. There she was, cleaning tables with focus. George walked up to her. Hi, he said, trying to sound calm. I just wanted to thank you properly for finding my wallet yesterday. She looked up and smiled. Oh, it was nothing. I'm just glad you got it back. What's your name? He asked. Susan, she replied softly. That's a beautiful name. George smiled. Susan, I'd love to buy you lunch as a way to thank you properly. Susan shook her head. I'm sorry, sir, but it's against restaurant rules for staff to eat during work hours. George nodded, slightly disappointed but not discouraged. He handed her his business card. All right then. Please call me after your shift. I'd really like to take you out to say thank you. Susan hesitated, then took the card. Okay, sir. That evening, Susan called. Hello, this is Susan. George's heart raced. Thank you for calling. Are you free now? I'd love to take you out for dinner. Susan agreed, and they met at a beautiful restaurant. Over dinner, they talked as friends. Susan told him her story. She had studied food and nutrition at the university, but was working as a waitress to support her mother and siblings. I dream of owning my own restaurant someday, she said. But for now, I'm doing what I can for my family. George was touched by her honesty and humility. You're an amazing person, Susan, he said. I'm really glad I met you. As time went on, George and Susan became very close. They talked every day, sharing their struggles and life stories. One day, after weeks of being friends, George invited Susan to his house. He surprised her with a special meal he had cooked himself. "You made this?" Susan asked, laughing as she tasted the food. George grinned. "Well, I had a little help from YouTube." They both laughed, and in that moment, George realized he didn't want her to leave. Being around her made him feel calm and happy. That night, after she left, he sat in his living room and said to himself, "She's the one. She's the answer to my prayer." With that in mind, George started planning the perfect proposal. One evening, he set up a romantic scene at his house, with soft music and candles, and invited Susan over. When she arrived, she was surprised. "George, what's all this?" she asked, smiling nervously. "Just wait," he said, and took her hand. Then he got down on one knee and opened a small velvet box. "Susan, you brought so much joy and peace into my life. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life without you. Will you marry me?" Susan's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, George, I will marry you." George slipped the ring onto her finger, and they hugged tightly. It was a moment they would never forget, the beginning of their life together. Excited, George wanted to share the news with his family. One evening, he got on a video call with his two siblings. Smiling, he held Susan's hand. "Everyone, I have some exciting news. I've found the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. Meet Susan, my fiancée." His siblings exchanged glances. His elder sister was the first to speak. "Oh, that's nice," she said in a stiff voice. "Where is she from?" "She's from the Southeast," George replied, still smiling. "She's an amazing woman, and I can't wait for you all to meet her." His older brother frowned. "Wait a minute. Is this the same waitress you mentioned before? The one who found your wallet?" "Yes," George said proudly. "She works hard and has big dreams." His brother interrupted. "George, are you serious? A waitress? Do you know the kind of people that go to those places? Are you sure she's not entertaining other men?" George's face changed. "Don't you dare talk about her like that." His sister added, "We're only saying this because we care about you. A woman who works in that kind of place isn't right for our family. Women in restaurants are usually not serious." "She's not just a waitress," George said firmly. "She's educated, hardworking, and peaceful. She's everything I've prayed for." But his siblings refused to accept her. They called Susan names, questioned her character, and made it clear that they would never support the relationship. Later that night, Susan found George sitting alone in the living room, his head in his hands. She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "George, what's wrong?" she asked gently. He looked up, clearly frustrated. "My siblings. They don't approve of us. They think you're not good enough for me, even though they don't know you." Susan's face fell. "Well, maybe they're right. I mean, I'm just a waitress." "Don't say that," George said quickly. "You are so much more than that. You brought peace and order into my life. I won't let their opinions ruin what we have." Susan smiled softly. "Thank you, George. That means a lot." He held her hands tightly. "We'll get through this together. I promise." Despite his siblings' objections, George and Susan went ahead with their wedding. It was a small and quiet ceremony with a few friends and some supportive relatives. His siblings came, but they clearly weren't happy. They didn't even try to hide how upset they were. Susan looked stunning in her white gown, and George couldn't stop smiling. After the wedding, they started their new life together. Not long after, Susan noticed that George had a habit of spending money carelessly. One evening, she watched him buy expensive gadgets online and couldn't stay quiet anymore. "George, do you really need all that?" she asked. He shrugged. "I have the money, so why not?" Susan sighed. "It's not just about having money. It's about how we use it. Let's try something new. Let's start using a budget." George raised an eyebrow. "A budget? What for?" "To help us plan our expenses," Susan explained. "We can write down who we need to support, what we need to buy, set aside money for savings and investment, and stick to the plan. Let's try it monthly and see how it goes." The next evening, George walked in and saw Susan at the dining table with a notebook and a pen. She was carefully writing down some numbers. "What are you doing?" he asked curiously. Susan looked up and smiled. "I'm working on the budget for us." George was surprised. "So, you were serious about this budget thing?" She nodded and gestured for him to sit next to her. "George, I have to be serious. I want the best for you and for our future. We can't move forward if we keep doing things the same way. You are very generous, and that's a good thing. But sometimes you spend money without thinking." "Without thinking?" George laughed. "I have enough, Susan. I don't need to worry about how I spend it." Susan shook her head gently. "What if something unexpected happens? Or what if you want to start a new business? We need to plan." George leaned back, interested but unsure. "So, what do you suggest?" Susan turned the notebook toward him. "I've listed the people you usually give money to, your siblings, some relatives, friends, and the regular house expenses." George leaned in and looked at the numbers. "This looks like a lot," he said. "It is," Susan agreed. "That's why we need a monthly budget. You will decide how much to give each person and stick to it. No more extra money unless it's an emergency." George scratched his head. "But what if someone calls with a problem? What if they really need help?" Susan shook her head. "George, you're not their bank. And you're not their savior. You've already done so much, but they don't appreciate it. This will help them become more responsible and value the help you give." George sighed. "All right, let's try it. What's the next step?" Susan smiled and flipped to another page. "We'll also start tracking everything you spend. If you buy something, write it down. This way, you'll see where your money is going. You'll be surprised. It's more than you think." George frowned. "That sounds like a lot of work." "But it's worth it," Susan replied. "Trust me, after a few months, you'll see the difference." George nodded. "All right, let's do it." And so they began. At first, it wasn't easy. George's siblings called often, complaining and asking for money. "George, I need an extra 200,000 naira for my rent," his brother Jack said one afternoon. "I'm sorry," George replied calmly. "I've already sent you the amount we agreed on for this month." "What?" Jack was shocked. "You can't be serious. Since when did this start? You know I always need more." George shook his head, even though Jack couldn't see him. "I can't help this time. Maybe you can find another way." Jack hung up angrily, but George felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time, he wasn't giving in to pressure. It felt like a burden had been lifted. One evening, as George sat on the couch reviewing his finances, Susan joined him. "Look at this," George said. "In just 6 months, we've saved so much money, and I've already started 2 new businesses." Susan smiled with pride. "That's amazing, George. I told you this would work." "You were right," George admitted. "I didn't think we could make this much progress. I've never been this organized before. You've really helped me." Susan laughed. "We're a team, George. That's what marriage is all about. And I'm glad you agreed to do this with me." But not everyone was happy about the change. George's siblings were angry. They couldn't call and ask for money whenever they wanted, like they used to. "That woman is trouble," his sister said. One morning, as she spoke with Jack, "She's the one controlling him now. George was never like this." "Exactly," Jack agreed. "Before she came into the picture, George never hesitated to help us. Now he's always saying things like budget and responsibility. What nonsense." "I don't care," his sister said angrily. "I will never accept her. She won't even last in that house." Still upset, she called George and started complaining. "Ever since you married that woman, you've changed. You don't care about your family anymore. Do you think you have any other family apart from us?" George took a deep breath and replied calmly, "Sister, I've cared about this family my whole life. But now, it's time for me to be responsible. Susan has taught me how to be better and how to manage my money. I'm grateful for her." "Grateful?" she snapped. "She's turning you against us, and you choose to ignore it." "No, sister," George said firmly. "She's helping me. If you can't see that, I don't know what else to say." Then he ended the call, feeling disappointed. Susan walked in and saw the look on his face. "Was it your sister again?" she asked gently. George nodded. They keep blaming you. Susan sat beside him and said, "Let them talk, George. You know the truth. I'm here for you." George hugged her tightly. "You are a blessing, Susan. I won't trade you for anything." One day, George was at work when he got a call from an old friend named Mr. Peter. "George, my friend." Mr. Peter's loud voice came through the phone. "I have an amazing opportunity for you." George was curious. He always liked hearing about new business ideas. "Tell me more," he said. "There's a business investment that will double your money in just 1 year," Mr. Peter said excitedly. "It's good business. All the big names in town are already investing." "How much are we talking about?" George asked. 50 million naira, Mr. Peter replied confidently. "But you'll get 100 million naira in return. It's a golden opportunity." George's eyes widened. "That sounds great. Send me the details." Mr. Peter quickly sent over the paperwork. George spent the next few hours going through it. Everything looked real and professional. He got excited and decided to talk to Susan about it over dinner. That evening, as Susan served their meal, George cleared his throat. "There's something I want to tell you," he said. "What is it?" Susan asked as she sat down. "There's this business opportunity. If I invest 50 million naira, I'll get 100 million in return within a year. The paperwork looks clean, and it feels like a chance I don't want to miss." Susan looked surprised. "That's a lot of money, George. Are you really sure about this?" "I've checked everything," George said confidently. "It's a solid deal." Susan tilted her head. "George, I think we should pray about it first. I just want us to be sure it's the right decision." George frowned slightly. "Pray? Susan, everything looks fine already. I don't think we need to pray." But Susan gently insisted. "Please, my love, it won't hurt to ask God for guidance." After a short pause, George agreed. "All right, we'll pray." That night, they knelt beside their bed and prayed together. George prayed boldly, asking for God's blessing on what he believed was already a good deal. Susan's prayer was different. She prayed carefully and said, "Lord, if this is not your plan for us, please give us a sign. Help us see the truth, even if it's not what we want to hear." The next morning, as they sat in the living room drinking tea, Susan looked troubled. George noticed right away. "What's wrong, Susan?" he asked. "I don't feel good about that investment," she said slowly. "Something in my spirit says it's not right." George frowned. "Not right? Susan, I've gone through the paperwork. Everything looks clean. This is what I'm good at. There's nothing to worry about." "I understand," she replied, "but sometimes things aren't always as they seem. Please, George, don't go ahead with it yet. Let's wait just 1 week." George shook his head. "Susan, the partners are pushing me to act fast. Other people are lining up for this opportunity." "Then let them wait," she said firmly. "If it's truly meant for you, it won't pass you by." Later that day, George reluctantly called Mr. Peter. "Mr. Peter, I need a little more time to think about the deal. Can we delay for a week?" Mr. Peter's cheerful voice quickly turned sharp. "George, what is there to think about? This is the best opportunity you'll ever get. If you don't act now, I'll have to offer it to someone else." "Then offer it to someone else," George replied, surprising even himself. "If the deal is as good as you say, it can wait." Mr. Peter snapped, "Fine, but don't come crying to me if you miss out." 5 days later, George and Susan were relaxing in the living room, watching the evening news. Suddenly, the headline caught their attention. "Breaking news. Major fraud scheme uncovered. Prominent investors arrested." George sat up straight, his heart racing. The news anchor began describing the same people who had approached him about the investment. They were shown on screen in handcuffs, being taken away by police. These individuals were running a scam and stealing millions of naira from investors, the anchor reported. Authorities also warned the public to be careful about similar fraud schemes. George felt his mouth go dry. He turned to Susan, who looked just as shocked. "Did you know them?" he asked. "I mean, how did you know they weren't genuine?" Susan shook her head. "I didn't know them. I just didn't feel peace about the deal." George leaned back, his hands trembling. Susan, you saved me. I could have lost 50 million naira, maybe even more. A few weeks later, George decided to show his gratitude in a big way. One afternoon, he blindfolded Susan and drove her to a surprise location. When they arrived, he helped her out of the car carefully. "George, where are we?" she asked nervously. He removed the blindfold. In front of them stood a beautiful restaurant with a sign that read, "Susan's Heaven." Susan gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "George, is this for me?" "It's yours," George said proudly. "You've always dreamed of owning a restaurant, and you've done so much for me. This is my way of saying thank you." She hugged him tightly, tears flowing down her face. "Thank you, George. This means the world to me." "You mean the world to me," George replied. "And this is only the beginning." Life was good to them. They lived in peace, and soon they had a baby girl. But George's siblings still hadn't accepted Susan. They continued to speak badly about her, but Susan had learned to ignore them. Later, George started building a mansion in his village, a home that would serve as a legacy for his family. Every month, he traveled to the village to supervise the construction. Susan always supported him and helped him pack. Soon, it was time for the roofing, a major stage in the project. George had made all the arrangements and was ready to travel. He woke up early, full of excitement. As he got dressed, he called out, "Susan, please bring my travel bag. I want to leave soon." Susan came in a few minutes later, holding the bag but not handing it over. "What's wrong?" George asked. "George, I don't think you should travel today," she said. George laughed lightly. "Why not? The project is waiting for me." "I don't know how to explain it," she said, "but I have a bad feeling. Please, let's find another way." George frowned. "Another way? I can't trust Jack to handle this. You know how he is with money, and I've done all the planning myself." Susan dropped the bag and pleaded, "Please, George, just this once, stay. I'm begging you." George sighed. "Susan, I appreciate your concern, but I can't delay. Everything depends on me being there. Don't worry, I'll be back before you know it." Susan watched helplessly as he left. Then she went back inside and knelt down to pray for his safety. About an hour into the journey, George was driving on a quiet road when something felt wrong. The brakes were stiff and not working. His heart pounded as he pressed them again and again, but the car wouldn't slow down. "No, no, no," he shouted, gripping the steering wheel. Up ahead, a large truck was coming fast. George couldn't stop the car. The last thing he remembered was the loud roar of the truck and a crashing sound. The sound of a machine beeping woke Susan. She looked up at George. His eyes fluttered open. A blurry figure stood beside him. It was Susan, kneeling by the bed, hands joined in prayer. "George, you're awake!" she cried, then rushed out to call the doctor. The doctor came in, smiling. "Mr. George, it's a miracle you survived. You've been in a coma for 1 month, but now you're on the path to recovery." George's mind was foggy, but he slowly remembered pieces of what happened, the truck, the brakes. "What happened?" he asked Susan after the doctor left. "You were in a terrible accident," she explained. "Some kind people found you and rushed you to the hospital. You've been here ever since." George closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the memory. "I could have died," he said quietly. "But you didn't," Susan replied. "God saved you, George." After a few moments of silence, George asked, "What about my siblings? Have they been here?" Susan hesitated before answering. "Yes, they came." George noticed her pause. "What is it, Susan? Tell me the truth." She took a deep breath. "They came 2 weeks ago, but not to support you. They told the doctor to turn off the machines keeping you alive." George's heart sank. "What? Why would they do that?" "They said it was a waste of money to keep you on life support," Susan said, her voice shaking. "But I refused. I told the doctor to keep you alive, no matter what." Hot tears rolled down George's cheeks as the betrayal sank in. "They wanted me dead, my own siblings." Susan nodded sadly. "I'm so sorry, George." George wiped his tears. "Promise me one thing, Susan. Don't tell anyone that I'm awake." I need time to process all of this. Okay, she said. I promise. 1 month after his recovery, George, Susan, and their daughter Kira decided to visit the village. George kept his recovery a secret. They traveled quietly and didn't tell anyone they were coming. When they arrived at a construction site, Susan stayed in the car with Kira while George stepped out. He was shocked to see his siblings standing with a stranger, deep in conversation. From their body language, it was clear they were discussing something serious. As George walked closer, his siblings didn't notice him at first, but when they saw him, their faces turned pale. His sister grabbed Jack's arm. "George, how are you here?" Jack stammered. We thought you were still." "Still what?" George cut in sharply. "Still in the hospital? Still dead?" The stranger, who didn't know what was going on, spoke up. "Is this the owner of the house? I was told he wasn't available." George looked at his siblings. "Who is this man? What is he doing here?" His sister stepped forward. "It's not what you think, George. We were just—" "Don't lie to me," George snapped. He turned to the stranger. "Who are you and why are you here?" The man answered plainly. "I came to buy the building. They told me the owner was no longer in the picture, and we already agreed on price." George's hands trembled with anger. He turned back to his siblings. "You want to sell my house? The house I worked hard to build? After everything I've done for you?" Jack tried to speak. "George, it's not what it looks like. We thought—" "You thought what?" George interrupted. "That I was gone, so you could take everything? You wanted me dead, didn't you?" Susan, who had been feeding Ken in the car, heard the shouting and rushed over. When she arrived, she saw George on his knees, scooping up sand in his hands. "George, what are you doing?" she asked. George's voice was loud and full of emotion as he raised the sand toward the sky. "If I have ever done anything wrong to hurt you, my blood, let this earth rise against me. But if I've done nothing wrong, and you still plan evil for me, let this ground fight against you. As long as you walk on this land, you will know no peace. Your evil plans will return to you and your families." Susan pulled him to his feet. "George, please calm down. Let's go. This is not worth your peace." George allowed her to lead him back to the car. His face was soaked with tears. His siblings stood frozen, unable to say a word. As they drove back to the city, George stared out the window in silence. Susan glanced at him now and then, her heart breaking for her husband. "George, talk to me," she said gently. He finally spoke. "Susan, I love them. I would have done anything for them. And still, they wanted me gone. They tried to sell everything I worked for." Susan sighed sadly. "I know it hurts, but you can't let their actions destroy you. You're better than this." George nodded slowly, but tears continued to fall. "From now on, I'm done with them. Once the house is finished, I will lock it up. No one will have access to it, not even them." That night, George lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about everything that had happened. Then he turned to Susan and gently shook her awake. She mumbled. "Is everything okay?" "I just want to thank you," George said, "for being a good wife, for always looking out for me, even when I didn't listen. God is protecting me through you, Susan." She smiled sleepily and touched his cheek. "We're in this together, George. I'll always stand by you." George kissed her forehead. "From now on, I won't make any decision without you. You are my God-given angel." Months later, George had regained his strength and peace of mind, but not his trust in his siblings. The mansion in the village was completed, but he kept it locked whenever they weren't there. One rainy afternoon, George received an unexpected call from his sister. He stared at the phone, unsure whether to answer. Susan noticed and said gently, "Pick it up. You won't know what she wants if you don't." Reluctantly, George answered. "Hello." "George," her voice was soft. "Can we talk? Please. It's important. What do you want?" George asked plainly. "I know we hurt you," she began, "but Jack is in trouble. He's sick, and we don't have the money for his treatment." George's heart tightened. Despite everything, Jack was still his brother. But could he trust him again? "I'll think about it," he said, and ended the call. That evening, he asked Susan, "What do you think I should do?" Susan thought for a moment before answering. "George, helping them doesn't mean you have to trust them again. If it's within your power to help, do it. But set boundaries. Protect your peace." The next day, George sent money for Jack's treatment, but he avoided any more contact with his siblings. When his sister called to thank him, he said simply, "I did it for my conscience, not for you." Susan was proud. "You did the right thing," she told him. "You showed grace without opening the door for more pain." Moral of the story: true strength lies in setting healthy boundaries. Even with family, love, loyalty, and trust must be earned, not forced. A good partner brings peace, guidance, and support, and listening to wise counsel can save you from great loss. Always follow your instincts, value the people who stand by you, and never be afraid to walk away from toxic relationships to protect your peace. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone special. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, stay safe and stay kind.